Welcome back, everyone, to another fundamental movement lesson. In this lesson, we are going to be talking about the hip hinge, arguably one of the most important movements that you're going to be learning throughout this entire course. The hip hinge is something that you will repeatedly see within every phase of this course. And the purpose of training the hip hinge so much is because it plays a huge role in our day-to-day living. Now, you guys might not know it as the hip hinge. You might know it as bending down to pick something up. So Shannon, bending down and picking something up. Very simple. And this is what we do typically every day. We also bend down, if you ever notice, when we're going to the bathroom or when we're sitting down on our couch or when we're trying to brush our teeth or wash our face in the sink, right? The purpose of training this hip hinge is because every time we bend down and we're unaware and we don't have the proper training or the muscles involved that create stability, we're dumping force into our low back. All right, so Shannon's gonna bend down and pick something up, and she's not going to properly do the hip hinge. And this is what's happening. She's bending down, she's lackadaisical about it, there's no muscles engaged, and she's flexing her spine. She's not hip hinging, she's back hinging. So essentially what's happening is that she's rounding her back to go down and pick something up. There's no involvement of the actual hip joint itself. And this is so important because the hip is designed to hinge. So now properly do a hip hinge, shooting her butt back, keeping the spine in a neutral position, and all the motion is being generated from the hip joint itself. So if you look at this spine model here, and I'm going to come closer here, when Shannon is bending down and actually properly performing the hip hinge, go ahead and bend down, Shannon. The butt shoots back and the hip articulates with the joint here, the socket, versus this staying fixed, but the back rounding and the pelvis not moving at all. One more time to reiterate the importance of this. When we don't have a proper hip hinge, the muscles that are designed to keep us stable are not active. When they're not active, that means the force cannot distribute properly throughout the entire body. So what happens oftentimes is that all the force will dump into the low back. Now, the low back is designed to be stable. It's not meant to handle a bunch of load. And when it has a bunch of load and it's not stable, that's when we feel all the aches and pains that typically live right around these joints here and in the lumbar spine. When we have hamstrings that are turned on, adductors that are turned on, our glutes are fired and activated, all that force transmission can flow through these big, thick leg muscles and start to take pressure and relief off of the low back. So that's the purpose of why we're training the hip hinge so much. It's going to give you more fluidity in your movement. It's going to help you move more freely, and it's going to help you live and express movement with a back that's stable. All right, guys, with that all being said, we're going to start with the fundamentals of the hip hinge, starting at the base where our feet are. All right, so moving towards the foot, this is where we start the hip hinge, right at our base. I want you to pay attention closely to what the foot looks like and how we're standing on a strong, sturdy tripod. The foot essentially has 3 points to it that make contact with the ground. We have a point at our heel. We are going to then go to our big toe, then to our pinky toe. If you can imagine, this creates a triangle, and that is a tripod base for us to stand on. So go ahead, plant your feet firmly on the ground, Shannon. Just play with rocking your feet onto the heel, the big toe, and the pinky toe. Play with this a little bit and get oriented with how you're standing on a sturdy base, and those 3 points of contact are hitting the ground. Once you feel like you played with this enough, I want you then to practice creating a wide foot, because the wider the foot, the more stable the base. The first thing we're going to get into is learning how to lift the toes up, splay them out, and letting the pinky toe hit the ground first. So let's zoom in here to this right foot. Shannon, go ahead and lift your feet up into the air. Just the toes, let the pinky toe hit the ground first, and then every other toe hit, and then the big toe last. Perfect. So she's splaying the toes out one more time, hitting the pinky toe first, and the big toes hitting the ground last, creating a wide foot. Go ahead, do the same thing with that left foot. Once she has done this, we now have created a wide foot, and we have those 3 points of contact. That is essentially our stable base where we're going to begin our hip hinge. So now that we've got oriented with our feet and how it grips the ground, how we can create a wide base and stand on that tripod, we're going to then take it to the knees and how the knees are involved in the hip hinge. The first thing we want to do is create a soft bend in our knees. So let your feet go shoulder width apart, a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. Slightly angle your foot out just a bit. And again, a soft bend. So we're not dropping down here. We're just lightly bending the knees just to create some activation in our quads. From here, we're going to stand on that wide base, lift the toes up, splaying them out, letting the big toe hit the ground last. And now we're going to start turning on our glutes, our adductors, and our hamstrings from this position here. So this is going to be your time to explore, your time to discover, and your time to create new movement patterns. And I really want you guys to take your time with this because the movements are so subtle. Like I just said, we're going to stand on that wide base. Feet are going to be angled out, and we're going to try to draw the heels back and in, like we're trying to pull the floor. So go ahead and play with this, guys. Pulling the heels in and back and relax. Pulling the heels in and back. It's very subtle, but it should be subtle. We have to train in this way so we can properly turn on the muscles before we get into the hip hinge. These muscles, the hamstrings and the adductors, they play such an important role in getting your body to hinge properly and distribute the force throughout the entire body. So keep doing this. We're just gonna sit here for a little bit because I want you guys to get this. Pulling those heels in and back. And if you can maintain that contraction, I want you to hold and count to 15 seconds. You should start to feel a shake. And that shake will feel like the inside of your legs are turning on, shaking, and your hamstrings should be shaking too. If you don't feel a shake, try to pull a little bit harder until you feel the vibration and the activation of the muscles that are turning on. Count to 15 seconds and then relax. Do this a couple times if you have to. Next, we're going to be getting into how these muscles play a role in getting you down and up from the hip hinge. All right, so now we're going to put all the movements together that we learned, and we're going to talk about how the muscles that we just talked about, the hamstring, the adductors, and the glutes, play such an important role in getting you up from that hip hinge. So we're going to have Shannon here perform a hip hinge, and I'm going to talk her through all the points that we want to focus on. We're going to go feet a little bit wider than our shoulders. We're going to take our feet and turn them outwards just a little bit. We're then going to splay the toes out, creating a wide base. Perfect. We're going to splay those toes out. We're standing on the tripod now. So now we have initiated a very strong, stable base. Our feet should be slightly crimped into the ground, and you should feel that stability translate all the way up from the foot throughout the entire body here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have a soft bend in our knees. And I want you, Shannon, to start to drift your butt backwards until you feel a light stretch in your hamstrings. So the butt's going to shoot back, and her back is going to stay in a neutral position. So she's not bending at the back here. She's hinging at the hips. So now she's bent forward. She has a light stretch in her hamstrings. And you can say now that the hamstrings are in a long position. So now we're going to take what we just learned. How do we activate the hamstrings and our adductors? We pull the feet back and in. And we imagine that the heels are coming back and in. So go ahead and do that. Turn those feet on. Boom. Relax. Do it again. Boom. Notice that right there, she has an initial lift. That tells me that she's fully activated those adductors and hamstrings, and the initial lift of the hip hinge wants to happen. She now just has to continue to activate it and follow that movement all the way up, squeezing her hamstrings, adductors, and glutes. Good. Let's go back down again. Let the butt fall back, drifting backwards. Back stays in a neutral position. The hamstrings are lengthened now, and she's going to turn on her hamstrings and adductors right there, and she's going to draw her body up. So how is this working? I want to explain this too. Face the window for me, Shannon. So how does this work? The hamstrings and the adductors are essentially acting as a pulley lever mechanism. If you've ever seen somebody raise a flagpole up, right? They're pulling a string, they're pulling that string down and the flagpole's rising up. The hamstrings are doing the same exact thing. So go ahead, get into that hip hinge, letting the butt drift all the way back until she feels a stretch in the hamstrings. So her hamstrings are lengthened. She's going to shorten the hamstrings by contracting them, pulling the feet in and back. The hamstrings are now shortening. Go ahead. And when they're shortening, they're pulling her whole body up. So visually imagine that your hamstrings and your adductors are what are turning on to lift you from that hip hinge. It's not your low back. We have to get out of the pattern of taking all the force of our low back and utilizing just our low back to bend down and pick something up. And we have to start getting into the pattern of dynamically utilizing the muscles that are supposed to be used within the hip hinge so we can start to experience the benefits of a back that's stable, that's mobile, and that's adaptable. We want to really be able to move freely here, and the only way to do that is to train the hip hinge in this way. So now we can play with utilizing some weight. In this instance, we're using a kettlebell. If you guys are part of the Align Movement course, and you should have already bought your kettlebell, we're going to place the kettlebell down. If you don't have a kettlebell, you can use anything, but we can play with hinging at the hips and picking up weight. So the first place we want to put the kettlebell is back behind the heels. The kettlebell sits behind the heels, and we're going to stand on that wide base, shooting the butt back, feeling the stretch in the hamstrings, reaching down to grab the kettlebell, and then we're going to hinge up by activating the hamstrings, adductors, and glutes, and then we can just keep repping down and up, slowly squeezing the adductors, hamstrings, and glutes to lift us up from the hip hinge. Play with a one-footed hip hinge. It's got to be the same mechanism. Let's say we're standing on our left foot. Use your right foot as a kickstand and slightly bend and hinge over that left foot. So bending and hinging over that left foot, shooting the butt back, feeling the stretch in your hamstring, and you can even put your hands on your hamstring to feel it. Then I want you to turn the hamstring and adductor on by drawing the heel back and in. Once the hamstring's turned on, feel how it naturally wants to lift you up. And just keep hinging, bending over that foot, activating the hamstring, turning it on and lifting up. All right, guys, that is it for the hip hinge video. Again, take time with this, play with this. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.